Hey, what's up guys? It's Marf and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to talk about the esports scene in Asphalt 9 again because it's been a while since we discussed it, and I think that, like I said previously, this game has a lot of possibility and opportunity when it comes to the esports side of things because mobile esports is growing bigger and bigger. I think this game in general is pretty popular, and if they actually pushed the esports scene and marketed it as an esport title, I feel like this game could get quite a lot of traction for the competitive scene, because I would think that right now a majority of the players are more casual or mid-core as opposed to, how many hardcore and competitive players there are. Of course, they're out there. Like, I'm a part of the RPM club, and that's just a whole competitive club in it of itself, and they actually have a cool tournament system going on, which is really awesome to see. But overall, I would argue that the majority of people, when they hop on Asphalt 9, it's for the cars, it's for the races, it's not really to go into a competitive zone. But I think that if Gameloft were to introduce more competitive aspects to the game and market it more towards the competitive scene, I feel like it could work very well because it's such a unique title. I mean, there's no other competitive stunt racing video game out there. A lot of the esports that I see in terms of racing are more on the simulation side. So I think Asphalt has a really nice opportunity to carve out its own niche, which I would love to see Gameloft take advantage of. So firstly, I wanted to talk about how Gameloft could fix up the current esports scene, because there is a lot wrong with what is happening right now with the ESL Mobile Open. Now, don't get me wrong, I really love the ESL Mobile Open. I think the format could use a bit of tweaking, but that's really kind of more on the ESL side from what I know. But in terms of what goes on in the Gameloft side of things, there is definitely a lot that needs to be improved. And really, it just comes down to how the game works in general. One of the biggest hurdles for players, and especially myself, when we're trying to compete in these qualifiers, is the amount of races we have to practice. Now, sometimes they'll provide a car that has a lot of fuel and a very low refill time, which is annoying, but it's not really the end of the world. But during this season of the ESL Mobile Open, it was actually a prime example of why this format is so terrible, because they actually gave players the opportunity to play with the Bugatti Chiron, which, as you know, is a pretty high-end S-Class car. Now, what that means is you only have 3 races every 6 hours, which is absolutely ridiculous for any esports game whatsoever. Now, of course, you can argue that you can watch ads to skip the time, or you could even pay up currency, but that presents a very high barrier of entry, and you might say, well, you can just spam advertisements. And while that's true, because it's a mobile game, you don't want to keep people waiting in order to participate and practice their runs. And that's exactly what this 6-hour refill time does, along with the 3 races that you have for gas. So the obvious solutions to these problems are just giving players unlimited fuel for the free try car and removing the ticket system for that specific event. It's really not too big of an ask in my opinion, and I don't think it'll cause players to be like, well, if we can get unlimited fuel and tickets in this mode, why can't we get it in all daily events? Because it'll stand out as a very specific esports mode, and I think players will understand that it's important for them to get unlimited tries and without any restrictions, because that creates a lower barrier of entry and encourages players to practice and get the best times as possible. I think right now, especially with the Bugatti Chiron having a 6-hour refill time and only 3 races, it causes a lot of players to just, use that up and then think, okay, well, that's it, I'm done for the day. And then you don't really have the best opportunity to get the best time as possible, because maybe you haven't played with the car before. Maybe you have not even played on that track before if you're a newcomer to the game. Either way, it presents a lot of stagnation for the esports scene, because you just have these really arbitrary restrictions that Gameloft could just easily remove. So in terms of entering the events themselves, that's a pretty easy solution, and I think that in terms of what ESL is doing, it's really awesome. I feel like they could improve the qualifier system itself. I like the previous one where they took the top leaderboard players and they would progressively get smaller and smaller, where now you have, I think, 4 or 5 weeks of qualifiers, and they take the top 1 person from each qualifier, and then those are the players that advance. I think that can be a bit stressful for players if maybe they see that they have to get top 1 in order to advance to the next stage. That's kind of daunting to a lot of people. The other big reason that you would want to remove these restrictions is because of what is known as flow state, or entering the zone. And a lot of players, including myself, when they play something that's competitive, whether it's a sport or a video game, you start to enter in this sort of flow state where you feel like you're doing really well and you're at your high peak of concentration and energy. And with Asphalt 9, it might take a couple of races for you to get used to the track, get used to the car, and as soon as you're done with those 3 races, bam, that's it. Maybe you've entered your flow state and all of a sudden you just can't play for 6 hours. And that's incredibly frustrating. I know as a Counter-Strike player, for example, it might take me a couple of rounds from the game to start in order for me to feel really comfortable with how I'm playing and what map I'm on in general. And so it takes me a while to get used to and get up to my full level of performance. And these arbitrary systems and limitations just completely remove that as a factor for when you're playing, which is really, really just frankly stupid. So now I wanted to talk about my idea for a better mode that would not only encourage the esports scene, but it'll set up a platform for players to get used to what esports and Asphalt could look like, and would provide a very solid ground for not only Gameloft to use, but also other tournament organizers such as ESL to use themselves in the game. That would create a much easier way of setting up esports and playing esports in Asphalt 9. Now, Gameloft has actually kind of done this already in another game, which is Modern Combat 5, and I'll have a screenshot for you right here of a mode called Tournament Mode in multiplayer that you can just go and play. Now, unfortunately, on iOS, it seems like I'm not getting matched against any players, which is unfortunate because it would be nice to show off what it would be like. But you can see that when you join a game, it pops up this bracket system, and you'll see that it has a natural progression of what an esports bracket would look like. And at the end, you'll have a 1v1 where the second place and first place is decided. Asphalt kind of already has an esports mode set up in the 1 versus 1 duel mode, which I really love and I really enjoy playing, but it really isn't too competitive because I don't think matchmaking considers where you are in the 1 versus 1 tournament. For example, if you're at 6 out of 12 races, I don't think it sets you up with players who are also at 6 out of 12 races. I think it just sets you up with random opponents. And the other problem is, at least in this one, it gives you 3 strikes before you lose completely, whereas in an esports tournament, you would either want single elimination or double elimination, or you could have a system where players can gain points by climbing up a leaderboard or winning races, and then that can qualify players into a bracket. Either way, I think a simple mode would be an esports mode within the multiplayer menu, kind of like where the 1 versus 1 sits. However, when you enter in that mode, it gives you 1 car choice, because if it's esports, everyone should be on an equal playing field, and you should enter into a bracket. Maybe it should be based off a region just because of the way that the internet works. You don't want to be playing someone halfway across the world because you could run into network problems, but it would enter you into maybe a 12-player or 16-player bracket, and you would battle your way up to the top, and there would be rewards depending on which place you end up in, kind of like how the 1 versus 1 mode works right now. But this would provide a platform for not only Gameloft, but also companies like ESL to use in their own tournaments, where you can enter in and win prizes based off of what place you end up in the tournament. Obviously, you would want the barrier of entry to be as low as possible, so maybe for just the default mode, kind of like what they're doing with 1 versus 1s, you would have a just no entry fee whatsoever. There is a lot of ideas and creativity and opportunity that can be had within this sort of tournament system. Gameloft can really go crazy with how they want to set this up. All I'm really bringing to the table is just the idea of having a bracket system in multiplayer where you go into a 12 or 16 player bracket and you work your way to the top. Now, they could even do like a loser's bracket where you have double elimination. I think single elimination would be more simplistic, and you could even add in a time limit, because obviously you wouldn't want someone to just, cancel out, and you would have no way of progressing through the tournament if you don't have an opponent. So there would be obviously things that you want to iron out and make sure, players can't take advantage of certain systems. But overall, I'm just saying that I think a bracket system tournament style multiplayer mode in Asphalt 9 would be really, really cool to see, and it would really help out the esports scene as well. Beyond that, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Gameloft needs to market for esports. They need to push the esports side of things, because one of the biggest sort of like epiphanies and sort of ways that people think about the economy is you have to put in money to get money. And esports is a very booming industry right now, and as I see it, Gameloft is not really doing a whole lot to push their game into the esports scene, because I feel like this game not only just as a mobile game, because that opens it up to a lot of audience members and also players because it's very accessible, but as a video game itself, the concept of driving around 1 or 2 laps in these really high performance cars, doing stunts and all of that, where you can base it off of a lap time, creates a really good opportunity for an esport in general. And I think there's a lot that Game Off could do with Asphalt 9 for the esports scene in general. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I will see you guys later.